All right. I'm Morag Ask with Associate Superintendent for Lethbridge School Division. I've been blessed to be the host for this session today on system education leaders' roles in building mental health capacity for students. Quite the mouthful. And I'm sure given the lineup of slides and presenters you've got today, it should be a real treat for you. We're definitely delighted to be here and look forward to the conversations and the learning that will happen for the next hour and a half, so until roughly about 2:30. As a provincial organization, we acknowledge that we are in traditional territory, gathering grounds, meeting place, and traveling route of the Treaty 6 First Nations, the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Dene, and Nakota Nations. Treaty 7 First Nations are the Blackfoot Confederacy of the Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani Nations, the Stoney Nakota Nations of the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney Nations, and the Tsuut'ina Nation, Treaty 8 First Nations of the Cree, Dene, Ta, Dane, Za, Denesaline Nations, and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples of the past whose footsteps have shaped this land, and those of the present and future who will continue to shape it for centuries to come. CAS is committed to restoring and honoring the truth and reconciliation calls to action, and we strongly believe that the truth must be acknowledged to move forward to reconciliation. Engaging in respectful, responsible, and reciprocal relationships with our First Nations and Métis communities is the path forward to reconciliation. Together, we call upon our collective communities to build a stronger understanding and relationship of all the peoples who dwell on this land we call home. Oki from Blackfoot Territory, because that's where I'm at. So agenda today, obviously setting the stage, and we'll be sharing stories of practice from 3 different school divisions, Elk Island Public Schools. And from Elk Island, we've got Sandra Stoddard, the superintendent, and Marty Hart, the mental health advisor. Do you want to just quickly say hello, ladies?
Hello, I'm Sandra Stoddard. I'm really pleased to be here this afternoon to not only do a little bit of sharing about our journey, but to hear about what other school divisions have done as well. And next to me is Marty Hart, who is our mental health advisor within Elk Island Public Schools.
Thank you and welcome, ladies. From Wolf Creek, we've got Barb Reaney, the Director of Education Services, and Kevin Newman, Assistant Superintendent of Education Services. I'll just turn it over to them for a sec.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Kevin Newman, Assistant Superintendent in Wolf Creek, and Barb joining us here, and her portfolio as Director in Education Services oversees our mental health supports and our school social workers, and of course our Mental Health in Schools project.
Thank you. Danica Martin, we are really fortunate to have you here. I know you're kind of the brains behind the operation as our CAS leadership consultant, but really has provided us with some good direction so that we can run this presentation today. So Danica, welcome.
Thank you, Morag. I'm happy to be here and just super thankful for all of our presenters today, because we know that learning from each other is one of the best forms of professional development and growth. And I know these 3 stories, and I know that you will benefit greatly from hearing what these 3 school authorities are up to support student mental health capacity.
And also in the background, but not really, is Rogan. Rogan Harper, he's our marketing tech lead and program support from ARPDC. Without you, Rogan, we probably wouldn't look as smooth as we're going to look today. So thank you for being here and shepherding us along.
Always happy to help. Morag, it looks like you've muted yourself and haven't unmuted.
My fingers are too fast. Thank you. And at the end of the presentation today, we have reflection and connection and some questions after each of our sessions, just to kind of hear a little bit about what's going on for other divisions and even some sharing and collaboration. So looking forward to that opportunity. And I'll turn it over to Danica.
Thanks, Morag. My role today is going to be short and sweet. I'll just take a few minutes to set the stage and provide a little bit of context behind today's topic and what brings us here today for some learning. So certainly welcome. As you know, we ground everything that we do with CAS in our professional practice standards. And so today there are a few that you'll hear woven throughout the stories of practice. What we certainly know as the braid image, they all intertwine together and they all work together. As you know as well, I think this webinar is the second in a series of 4 webinars. And so this slide is just a reminder that there's 2 more coming up in May and June, and those can be registered for under events online learning on the CAS website. They'll also be advertised in CAS Connects closer to those dates of those events. The series, this webinar series definitely focuses on system education leaders' role in supporting student mental health, with the ultimate goal always of ensuring optimum learning for all students in school authorities across the province. And we hope that today you'll have the opportunity to examine and learn about system education leader practices that support and build student mental health capacity. And your comments and conversations and thoughts will help contribute to the development of learning materials that will support system education leaders and will be housed on the CAS website. So thank you for being here today. Today's guiding questions that you'll hear woven throughout the 3 stories of practice are on this slide. I won't read through them, but you will definitely hear from 3 school authorities who are doing work in the area of building student mental health capacity, particularly from that system education leader lens, and what is going well for them and what are some of the challenges and successes and strategies that they've been implementing within their school authorities. We know that there are things beyond the professional practice standards that guide and ground our work. I always like the reminder in the Education Act that we are required as school authorities to provide a continuum of supports and services to students that are consistent with the principles of inclusive education. And so student mental health and building student mental health capacity certainly falls under that directive in the Education Act, but just a reminder of the other documents and legal requirements and policies that guide and ground our work today and always. We also know that a lot has been done and is being done throughout the province. So Alberta Education is currently funding almost 80 mental health in schools pilot projects. Some of them end in December of this year. Some of them continue till June of 2025. The projects are clustered in these 5 topic areas: counseling, social emotional learning, student assessment, family and parent supports, and training for school staff. Certainly that building student mental health capacity falls into several of those topic areas. And I know from speaking to many of the project ambassadors throughout the province that building student mental health capacity is at the forefront of a lot of these projects, and is seen as a really high leverage strategy. You may also be aware, or may not, but the University of Calgary Centre for Wellbeing and Education is conducting research about the mental health in schools pilot projects, and their research is set to conclude mid to end 2025 with the potential of a framework that they're working on developing. And so I'll highlight a little bit of that for us today in this preamble. CAS, of course, has prioritized this work with this webinar series. There's a community of practice going on right now for mental health in schools pilot project participants, and there are some resources and learning guides being developed that will be housed on the CAS website for future learning. And of course, we know out of COVID, the Alberta Child and Youth Wellbeing Review and Action Plan also support this topic and this work. As well as just a reminder, and I won't spend time on this slide, I know you're all familiar with these resources, but there are a plethora of resources out there to support student mental health capacity and building that capacity in our school authorities. Alberta Education absolutely values this work as well. They see supporting positive mental health as a shared responsibility of parents, educators, and community members, and that schools are key environments to promote and support and build those protective factors in our students. Of course, you know, we have the captive audience of having the students for a good portion of the time. So just highlighting that support from Alberta Education. They also recognize that mental health approaches and practices in schools can help students succeed in a variety of ways and build capacity for students to be able to deal with challenges and deal with emotions and regulate themselves as they move through their lives, which creates warm, welcoming, caring, safe, and respectful learning environments, but also creates welcoming, caring, respectful, and safe citizens as our students grow and move out into the world. From the University of Calgary research that is undergoing about the mental health in schools pilot projects, they definitely recognize and are recognizing several themes, including schools being essential settings for mental health and supports, and that many of the risks associated with poor mental health are widely seen as preventable. And so this topic today about building student mental health capacity becomes even more important when we think about the prevention side of mental health issues. Universal mental health supports result in positive impacts on student performance in the school environment, but also enhances the knowledge and approaches to mental health by education staff. And they have also highlighted in their research and their early themes that active senior leadership is necessary to effectively implement these supports. And so you'll hear today 3 stories of practice of really key roles in school authorities supporting this concept of active senior leadership as we do this work. From the Working Together resource, they definitely talk about students with positive mental health being resilient. And so resiliency is almost a synonym of building capacity because it speaks to the capacity of individuals to cope with stress-related situations, overcome adversity, and adapt positively to change. And certainly highlighting that the research suggests resilient individuals share, the qualities on this slide. But importantly for our students, they have effective problem-solving skills. They're able to seek help from others when they need support. They have more positive experiences and interactions with peers and adults, and they can start to understand their own emotions and build that resilience to move forward successfully in their careers. Some of what you will hear today may reference this CASEL framework, and I know most of you are probably familiar with it, but social emotional learning is definitely seen as a foundation in building student mental health capacity. And with that, I will turn it back over to Morag to get us started with the stories of practice, which is the reason you're all here today.
Thank you, Danica. So first up on the docket is Elk Island Public Schools. Leading through a paradigm shift. I'm sure that's something that will also be a theme for each of the groups that are sharing today. Marty Hart, Mental Health Advisor, and Sandra Stoddard, Superintendent, will be sharing their story.
Great. Well, thank you, Danica, for the opening, and just good afternoon to everyone. I think it goes without saying that collectively we are here because we all know the importance of mental health, not only on academic achievement, but also on the notion of, pardon me, learning, attendance, and well-being, and it's such an important factor for all of us. So I'm going to start off by just providing just a high-level overview of Elk Island Public Schools and a little bit about the project. I will hand it over to Marty, who will go into detail about the project, the pilot project that we've engaged in. And then we'll end with some of our system leadership practices that we have identified. And of course, every division is different, but for us, it's those practices that we have found have been able to support in enhancing the mental health and well-being across our division. So in Elk Island Public Schools, we are the 6th largest school division within the province. What I love about Elk Island is we are urban and rural, and they are very different contexts. And so having that opportunity to look at mental health through what an urban school division has versus what our rural schools have in terms of access to supports and services from a wraparound perspective is plays a large role in how we roll this forward. We serve over 17,760 students from K to 12. We have 42 schools within our division. So we serve not only Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, we go out into Bruderheim, Lamont, Mundare, and as far as Vegreville. And we employ over 1,540 staff. One of the things that we noticed in our division, and really it's as a result of COVID, we noticed that we were seeing a higher number of students that were presenting with I would say heightened mental health challenges. We saw a lot of increase in stress and anxiety in our students and a very change in the dysregulated behaviors that were being exhibited within each of our schools. And so we have done since that time a significant amount of work in addressing the mental health challenges. The board over the last couple of years and has invested well over $1 million into developing our mental health strategic plan, which included being able to hire Marty, who has over 40 years of experience in the mental health arena, knowing not only about promotion and prevention of mental health, but knowing the services and all the way into intervention. And so she's been a wealth of knowledge in helping us develop our strategic plan. We also received, we did apply for the pilot, and so we received over $1.9 million to implement our pilot project that is around reset rooms. And I am going to hand over the next slide for Marty to talk a little bit about what our conceptualization of the research room was, so that you can get a broader context in terms of what we were doing, and then we will progress with our presentation.
Perfect. Thanks, Sandra. So we have created reset rooms in our junior high sites. We deliberately chose our junior highs, that age group, because they seem to be struggling the most at that point. We had surveyed kids during a student voice forum, and we found that about 2/3 of them reckoned that their mental health and well-being was worse then than it had been pre-pandemic. So that's kind of the closest you can get to figuring out what's happening with them. The purpose of this pilot was to improve the mental health and well-being of our students so that a variety of outcomes would come to be. And those are, of course, are related to academic outcomes, as well as some of the resilient-based outcomes as well. 12 schools are involved in this. 4 of them serve peer grade 7 to 9, 4 serve 7 to 12, and 4 serve kindergarten to 9. So the 7 to 9s fit into each of those categories, and we've kind of kept data on the differences that we might see. We believed that we needed to have this mental health intervention be a self-referral process, and perhaps that was the most abrupt paradigm shift that we attempted. As adults, we like to think that we can look at children and decide how anxious they are and what intervention they might need, and could they stay in math class and just pull up their socks or not. We did it differently, and we asked that all teachers allow students to go to the reset room if they said they needed it. And then we worked with the certificated teacher in that room to be able to help gatekeep, if you will, to decide, you know, is this kid using the reset room inappropriately, perhaps. We wanted certificated teachers staffing these rooms. That was a very important piece of this, because we knew there are academic lags related to the pandemic and the fallout from the pandemic. And we knew that if you have an academic lag, your chances of displaying challenging behavior in the classroom goes way up. And then they're not able to learn, and they interfere with the learning of others. So very loosely, the 4-step process in a reset room makes it different than a sensory space, and makes it different than the counselor's office, and makes it different than a resource room. So we wanted to really have something that hadn't been tried before, because in this division, we've had iterations of each of those. So the 4-step process is based on a book called The Reset Process by Diane Gwynne Carrer. And the first step is simply moving your body. So we have bikes or treadmills in the reset rooms. Then you modulate down and you have smaller muscle movement. Then you activate their thinking using some cortex strategies, which might be a board game. And then you make a plan to get back to class. We found that it was really important to do this with our divisional staff rather than to them, and rather than imposing that you must do it such and such a way. And we didn't want to do it for them either. This wasn't just a place to dump children who weren't doing well in class. Everyone had to be involved. So we often say everyone has a role in the reset rooms. We used data a lot to decide the direction that we were taking over months. The student forum data I spoke to you about, we looked at our chronic student absences. I'm sure you all know that, you know, the rate of chronic absences has really increased over the pandemic. In the United States, they reckon it's doubled. We aren't quite at that point, but we know that there are a lot of children who are having a hard time returning to school, and even once they're there, remaining in their cohort classes, and if they're there, learning. We utilized change theory. We knew we would have early adopters. There are always that group of people who are just so gung-ho to try anything that's going to help kids. And we knew that with the mental health and well-being of our adults, who we also surveyed, that there remains what we used to call laggards in the change theory, and now someone called caves, citizens against virtually everything. So there are, we knew that we would have a variety of people who are themselves struggling with well-being, and then we're going to ask them to trust us to use this change to help regulate their nervous system. So we're going to just look at the phases. Phase 1 began before we had any money. If you recall, well, those of you who applied in the summer, we didn't actually get the money until December. So we decided from September to December, we were going to provide professional learning for our staff. We used book studies, we used the brain architecture game, we watched the video Paper Tigers, many, many different ways to fit the variety of school cultures. In phase 2, which was, you know, sort of the bulk of the work, that's when those rooms opened. We had to reframe adult resistance in a way that that took into account the adult mental health, and that way we could find some interventions. We used staff voice frequently. We surveyed all the time. They must be tired of all of our surveys. And we really acknowledged and provided support for steadying the adult nervous system, to the point where some of the schools have now opened an adult reset room. And phase 3 is what we are in now. And that is where we're moving the very successful strategies from the reset room into the cohort classrooms. Can we use those same strategies as universal strategies so that all students are able to benefit from them? It's having a positive impact without a doubt. So we'll talk in a few moments about what our outcomes are, but essentially this is the staff, the cohort staff in the schools. So not the reset teachers, but all the other staff. So in June of 2023, 81% said that, yeah, it's having a positive impact. We're up to 91 now. Are kids using it appropriately? Are they using it to settle their nervous systems? They weren't too sure at the beginning, but it's coming up as well. Is it supporting academic success? All of these indicators are improving, so we know that it's having an impact for our schools.
And I just want to supplement a little bit to give you a broader context. So in this project, in each of those schools, they have identified a reset room. And in there, it is just a place for kids to go when they are feeling dysregulated. And as Marty said, they get to choose to go into that program. It is with a staff member that has gone through extensive training with Marty around how the brain functions, how to help kids with strategies on regulating. And as well, we have solution navigators as part of this project that connects, because we know that mental health sometimes is very complex, and families and students need to be able to be connected to outside intervention and other supports. And so it has a component where kids start to learn how to regulate, and if they need extra supports, we've got an external agency employed to help support kids and families to access those resources. The two would not be able to be as effective if they weren't as part of the project. I had the privilege yesterday, Marty had brought forward students as well as parents and the staff together to debrief where we are at and the impact that the project has had on individuals. We had some incredibly anxious kids that both them and their families had told us how it was almost immobilizing their ability to learn. And as a result of this program, kids were not only able to talk about the science and the research behind how the brain functions and how to regulate behavior, but they were able to say, they were able to take a situation where they went to the reset set room and transfer it and apply it to other situations that were happening in their classroom environment or even in their home environment. In so much that some of the kids were also then teaching other kids some of the strategies that they were learning. And as a result, the change, I mean, I had tears because the impact was absolutely phenomenal in how it has transformed kids' lives and how they talked about it as being a safe place that they could learn how to regulate. And when they went home, they were able to unwind and relax and not carry the baggage of holding in some of their anxious behaviors or not acting out in ways that would result in, suspension or some other negative consequences. So the positive impact has been tremendous. Oops, I have to go back. So one of the things when we talk about what are some of the things that we have learned from a system perspective, it was important for us to be able to really identify the issue. Had we not really looked at what we were seeing both from a qualitative but a quantitative perspective in terms of the increase in anxiety, the increase in suspensions and expulsions that we were seeing, and also the increase in our violence threat risk assessment processes. If we hadn't really looked at, we were also seeing absenteeism happening. And if we hadn't done the student forum, we probably would have started in the elementary level. Yet the whole robust identification of an issue allowed us to focus where we saw the needs, and it absolutely is having a positive impact. It actually allowed us to pull our research in identifying what a pilot project was for moving forward. The other piece that we found, had we just implemented the pilot project without a real focus on a strategic plan, a strategic plan that identified high expectations, that really, believed that here's an issue, and if we do this, and this, we are going to be able to address that issue. And so that whole positiveness and high expectations that we can make a difference in mental health if we focus on developing a strategic plan that embeds all of the research-based practices in there. So we did design a set of very specific outcomes, short-term and long-term, that we wanted to see. We identified some very high-level and very detailed success measures, as well as conceptualize the whole continuum of supports that kids might need to experience success when we were finished. We really believe that that has had a positive impact on well-being and academic success. We also realized that you cannot implement something without sustaining a culture of continuous learning. And so what we ended up doing is we not only identified the leads, which were our teachers in the reset room, but we also identified that we had to constantly and consistently share data on how we're doing. Oh, I went the wrong way. So I went to the last one. After the strategic plan, it was about the readiness stage. So we had to build common purpose and understanding. And it wasn't just with our reset classrooms, it was across the division. So in order for us, we believe that you have to build capacity across the division to be able to see sustainable change. So we did, and Marty and her team did a lot around building the knowledge and expertise around the science and the why are we doing this. They built understanding on the purpose of reset rooms. I'm going to say at the beginning, there were teachers that said, you mean you're going to have a full-time teacher in there and they don't have 30 kids in the class? There was a lot of anxiety about, Is this going to be beneficial to kids? We had to challenge old beliefs around this is more about understanding that kids may not necessarily be able to choose how they're feeling and choose the anxiety. Like sometimes teachers will say, oh, just get over it. That we needed to build capacity in stakeholders to understand that mental health needs to be recognized, that it needs to have a systemic way of addressing it and supporting kids from a very restorative kinds of lens. And it also meant the importance of teacher leaders. So those reset teachers were then charged when they started to build capacity to go out into their broader school environment and work with the other teachers so that common language and common understanding and common practices not only were happening in the reset room, but were also happening in the other classrooms. Marty also spent a lot of time building capacity in parents so that parents had the same understanding of what we were doing and what the common language and common practices were, so that we created a system that was working collectively and cohesively together. In terms of the building the expertise, some of the things that we identified, and it goes back to Marty saying we weren't doing it to people, we were doing it with people. So while we put parameters around what our expectations were, we said, how you get there is totally up to you. So our reset rooms look very different across the settings because context in each of the classrooms is very important. We provided monthly ongoing support, which included multiple different ways of professional learning, whether it was online, in person, collaboration time. We really empowered people to share and talk about the practices that they were seeing, the successes and challenges, and sharing the data that they were gathering. And then we really showcased the strategies to further build expertise across the division. And where we are now is that we are working at creating that culture of continuous learning so that we are continuing to collect and share the data. We are refining our practices, and we are thinking about what can we integrate and implement now across the system from the learnings that we have experienced. So from our perspective, without all of those pieces, we don't believe that we would have sustained the growth that we have achieved so far. And here, just really quickly, I wanted to share with you some of the data that we're collecting. When each time the kids come in, like we are hoping that more students will seek out and access mental health supports, that there will be greater awareness of mental health supports to students and families, an increased level of attendance and engagement at school, proactive mental health practices resulting in fewer mental health crises, fewer VITRAs, fewer suspensions and expulsions, increased achievement at school, and we are specifically looking at higher school completion rates, which are more of a downstream outcome that we will track later on, and improved assurance measures related to welcoming, caring, respectful, and safe learning environments. I know that just as one more piece, every time a student accesses the reset room, they indicate where they are at in terms of their emotional level on a scale of 1 to 10. And when they leave, they also record where they're at. And that data is providing us evidence of the ability for kids to enter, sometimes for short periods of time, and go back into the classroom. And sort of very high level, those are some of the practices that we've been implementing in Elk Island Public Schools. And we have just some reflection and connection questions at the end. However, open to any questions or other insights that you might have or might want to ask us at this point.
Thank you very much, Sandra and Marty, for sharing that story. Remarkable that you're seeing so much turnaround already, and exciting for the students that get that opportunity to access those services. Just want to welcome Lenora to the conversation. Chris, Pamela, Teresa, and Valerie, you joined us earlier, but again, just really great to have you guys here so that we have an opportunity to hear from you. Just wondering if there are any comments or questions from our group.
I just have one question if I could. First of all, great work and great summary. Thank you for providing all of that. I was keen partway through your presentation to kind of see some of the ways you're measuring it, and it seems like there's a lot of positive results coming from this. I'm curious if you can just speak to what your biggest challenge has been going through sort of all of this change and getting getting staff on side, getting parents on side, and communicating all of this to the point where you're getting such good results. What would you say was the most difficult part of this change for everybody in the district?
Without a doubt, it was the adult mindset. We all have biases. We won't admit it, but we all have biases about mental health and mental illness, and even mental distress. So one of them I already mentioned, that we think we have superpowers as adults, and we can automatically tell when a child might need some different kind of intervention than you can provide in a class of 25 other kids. So that was a big one. What we found was most effective was once teachers see the positive of even a very quick reset, so one that they can use in their classroom, once they see that, they immediately grab onto it. I had a school counselor say, Marty, when you first started talking about this, I thought it was BS, honestly. But all we did was showed her a couple of focused attention strategies that she then used in her classroom, and very quickly make a peace sign with your right hand. I can see you all, so make a peace sign. Make an okay sign with your left hand. And now as smoothly and quickly as you can, switch. How many before you make a mistake? Can you go fast? What that's doing is turning on your prefrontal cortex, which is what teachers need in the classroom. So as soon as teachers saw that they could do that in 10 seconds or less at the beginning of a class, and that it did actually work, they bought in.
I think some of the other challenges were around that whole notion, and Marty talked about the mindset shift, and this is about building your own internal capacity. The stigma about asking for support, right, was still there. But from our teachers as well, it was more, I need to tell you that you need to, go to the reset room. And so allowing teachers to recognize it was very, very important for students to be able to do that. What it was shifting the mindset, like in talking to students, it's like the reset room now, it's okay if you have mental health, some challenges, because it's accessible by everybody. And, they consistently talked about people that they normally may not have socialized with. When they come in that room, they're dealing with the same thing and they're supporting one another. So I think it has opened up that notion of saying it's okay to ask for help. I think the other thing that was the hardest, and those of you that are in, it was changing that mindset from punishing dysregulated behavior to supporting it. And that is a huge mind shift, because I know it's frustrating, especially with some dysregulated behavior that might have physical acting out or disturbs the classroom. It's far easier to kick the kid out than, because you're frustrated, than to say, wait a minute, this child just needs to go to the reset room to get re-regulated. And so that was a mind shift. In fact, at the beginning, I think a lot of people, like Marty said, didn't think it would work, and it's a waste of time. But now that we're up to 90% of staff going, this has made a difference in our kids. Like, they are coming back. Sometimes a reset teacher will get a phone call saying, like, what did you do with them? And they're, they're so impressed with how the kid is able to come back totally different, regulated, and ready to learn.
Nice.
Pamela, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks very much, ladies, for that. It's very, very helpful. I'm wondering, with all of the resources out there today in your phase 1, how did you decide on what resources and PD that you would use systematically, and what did your implementation look like when you were introducing these topics?
So we did most of it internally. So we We set it up. At one point, we had, I think it was like 150 or 200 staff come together on a PL day, and they played the brain architecture game, because we knew from speaking to the adults in our division that they didn't really understand the brain. I mean, really, there's no pre-service training that honors that, right? And the since we got brain imaging in the 1990s, we know so much more, but it hasn't really trickled out into everybody's areas, right? So we did it internal. We did the brain architecture game, anything that that taught people about the science of the brain was really important, because it is hugely misunderstood. Prior to the pandemic, in doing this work, we had to find ways to dysregulate adult brains to show them how to re-regulate. Now with the pandemic, we have that common experience where we were all dysregulated, and we can go back and think about that and think about what worked for ourselves.
And in terms of phase one, as a division, and Mark, like in developing the strategic plan, we already knew the research-based strategies that would make a difference. So the reset room was based on research, specifically around neuroscience. And it was really cool yesterday hearing kids talking about the prefrontal cortex and their amygdala. And they viewed their inability to dysregulate more from a science perspective, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I've got mental health issues. And I didn't, it was just a real change in how they were viewing, their own challenges that they were experiencing.
Right, thanks.
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Marty, for sharing that story. Definitely some great work that you guys obviously have done, and looking forward to continuing to hear about the successes that you're achieving. Next on the docket is Barb and Kevin. I'll turn it over to you guys.
Great, thank you very much. So our project focused on developing universal social emotional learning supports and programming within our schools. And Wolf Creek School Division, Wolf Creek Public Schools, serves about 7,400 students, 29, soon to be 30 schools. We opened a brand new high school in Black Falls, Alberta in September. We have about 900 plus staff. And basically our district, it hits the communities of Ponoka, Lacombe, Black Falls, and then a whole bunch of small little communities that I had never heard of until I started in Wolf Creek, like Clive, Alberta, and Bluffton, Alberta, and all these wonderful little communities in the central Alberta region. So our program was designed to align with our education plan, which focuses on 3 pillars. It's a 4-year education plan that focuses on quality teaching, supporting all students, and collective responsibility. And when we look at our mental health in schools project, we really have it aligned to each one of those 3 pillars. The focus area, as I mentioned, was developing those universal supports for social emotional learning in our schools. And really, the rationale comes out of coming out of the pandemic, things that we noticed in our system, which I don't think is anything different than any other district. To be honest, at the time that the Mental Health in Schools project was designed in Wolf Creek, I was actually in Foothills School Division, designing the Foothills School Division project as a Director of Inclusive Learning, and then shifting over here. So this is the take of what we know, what was noticed before my arrival here, but things like this were common even in other divisions that I was aware of. That decline in the ability for students to manage their social emotional learning, that dysregulation, and teacher efficacy around social emotional learning instruction. There was a big kick that we had to get back on track with learning and not making sure that kids were ready to learn before we started teaching them. That teacher feedback around lack of time, resources, and ability to plan for SEL programming. They had way too much on their plate. They just weren't getting to it because, again, pandemic, kids are behind by 2 grade levels on their reading. I don't have time to teach the kids how to manage their emotions. We found that there was lack of consistency around SEL understanding and language throughout the division, and significantly increased demand for individualized support from our school social workers. And their inability, because of that demand, to provide that universal programming, inability to provide universal programming due to that huge demand around individualized supports. Also feel that that also became a bit of a comfort zone in some ways for some of our school social workers as well, was working in that individualized world as opposed to pushing into that universal. We understood that there was that immediacy needed for individualized supports, that the long-term gain, that the gains you get from universal supports are long-term. You don't do a classroom universal SEL strategy today and see all the kids are fine tomorrow. So we still needed both those ends of the continuum supported.
Okay, when we first started our project, we met as a leadership team, a system leadership team. So our superintendent, our assistant superintendent, myself as director, were involved in that discussion to collaborate and really brainstorm about how we would move this project forward. And then from there, we developed a working group, which we took volunteers off of our administrators. So any administrator that wanted to come forward, any social workers that wanted to come forward, and we had hired the social emotional learning facilitators. So we met as a working group over a period of a few months to really develop and explore what this would look like and how it would roll out into our schools, and to gain a better understanding of that universal programming and the impact it would have on all students. Lots of our schools gear towards wanting more of that group work and individual work, as Kevin mentioned, but we wanted to ensure that all of our students were receiving the same message, because if they didn't fit into a group or they didn't fit into the one-on-one, they still needed that message around self-regulation and whatnot. So we then partnered with our primary care network, we partnered with Alberta Health Services, and we partnered with our rural mental health community animator and neighborhood place. We developed our goal. We put our staffing in place. So we hired 2 FTE, which equaled 3 people, to be those social emotional learning facilitators that would go from school to school in the division to work with our students. Our programming, we partnered with our partners, we partnered with our schools, and we developed programming based on the CASTLE model for social emotional learning. We also developed some, sorry, I'm just going to move over. Kevin left here. I'm just going to move over so I can grab the control here. We also developed some parent programs. We developed some creation of a social emotional learning framework. And we are, as we wind up our project, we are putting all of our resources and presentations into a bank for parents and staff to access at any time that they would like to do so. So how do we know that these strategies are building that capacity? So again, as I mentioned, all students receive that universal programming. We would develop a menu in the spring that we would send out to the schools, and they would be able to choose through a work order process what programs they wanted, the dates that they wanted, and then on our end, the social emotional learning facilitators would work that into their schedule and travel from school to school. We did ask that it was geographically feasible to scheduling, so we weren't traveling out to the west part of our division and then traveling to the east part on the same day. So they would work that into what best suited their schedule and what best suited for the school. We wanted to determine if peer relationships would result in lower numbers of struggle and conflict, because lots of our programs were based on that, the self-awareness, the ability to regulate, whether it was co-regulation or self-regulation, but them being able to determine that. And of course, we gathered feedback from our students and from our staff. We wanted to see that lower numbers of students were accessing individual support from our school social workers. We collect data on that. The common language, I think, was mentioned earlier by Elk Island, that mental health literacy, to ensure that we all, staff, students alike, had that common understanding and language and recognize the stigma and how that affected how they access resources. We also, that awareness of the mental health supports and helplines that are available and how to access them. A better understanding for our teachers and our support staff to have the tools to feel that they can utilize those strategies and they have the information readily available so that students can access that support at any time, and families as well. Increased level of attendance, and the academic performance, of course, is improved if their social emotional ability is stabilized. So successes from our plan. So again, I mentioned the system leadership. So that's our superintendent, our assistant superintendent and director. The working group, again, the administrators, social workers, but that was led by a director. So direct involvement from myself, the director, on a day-to-day basis, leading this project was imperative for it to be successful in our division. We fostered effective relationships. So the welcoming, respectful, safe, and caring environment, partnerships with our families, partnerships with our communities, and working really for the best interests of our students. Evidence of learning and the skills, as I mentioned previously, we had both qualitative and quantitative data, and we connected all of our programs in our menu. At the very beginning, we just sent out the menu, and we learned quickly that if we could make a curriculum connect, that had much more impact on our teachers, and they were more willing to book an SEL facilitator to come in to deliver that programming because they could match it to what they needed to match that in the curriculum. So some of our surveys, we had staff, including school leaders, surveyed, and they responded with 88.5% of their students benefit. They felt they benefited overall from the program. We surveyed students themselves in grades 3 to 6, grades 6 to 10, and really good results there. Around 81% also responded that they understood themselves better. They benefited from the program in their behavior, their regulation, their emotions, their decisions. And we offered some parent sessions. We didn't have huge turnouts at our parent sessions, but we did get some, so which was better than none. So that was beneficial. And they also reported that they felt the information they received at those sessions was valuable. Some of the challenges in the implementation, of course, was our parent engagement. And I think we continue to struggle with that. I don't think we have developed the optimum of how we get our parents to become engaged. We've done in-person sessions, we've done online sessions. And like I say, we typically have about 20 to 40, which we felt was quite successful considering in-person is a much lower number. Some of the challenges too, the understanding of the importance of that universal programming. So we had a few schools that didn't take part in it. Some of it was because of the scheduling. Some of it was because they felt they had it already under control at their school and it was being provided. Some really wanted just that group work and individual work. And we continue to stress that the message was important for all students. Another challenge that we had was the need and the demand for the programming was much higher than we anticipated. Schools were asking for SEL facilitators to be in-house, to be at their school on a more regular basis. They wanted this programming much more than what we had the FTE to provide. Another challenge was facilitating that program at the high school level, where they have heavy course loads and the length of the classes are longer. Trying to get into those high schools proved to be a little bit of a challenge. We did, and to our outreach schools as well. We did get into a few of them and it was successful, but it proved to be a little more difficult than the elementary. And we also found that universal programming at the elementary services our students longer term, I guess, or we're going to see the impacts as they reach the junior high level. Scheduling, again, that geographic scheduling created a little bit of problems. Some of our schools wanted somebody there on a Monday in block 6 and a Tuesday in block 3, and we are fairly widespread, so that didn't always work. And then, of course, the predictability and the sustainability of the funding for our staff. Some of our next steps and how we plan to wrap up this work is we want to continue with that leadership focus and make it a goal as we move forward. What that looks like right now, we're just in the development stage of how we continue to ensure that this universal programming stays intact once we have all the resources available to the schools. And of course, the supports available and the access to all of the things that are listed there. We want students, families, and teachers to be able to pull that up at any time and use it regularly in their classrooms. So system education leader practices that are necessary, as I already mentioned, the belief and the buy-in from senior leadership is crucial. The trust in these programs will service our students and build capacity in our students and lead to higher academics, less absenteeism. The direct involvement from myself as the director in every aspect of the project is again, from that system leadership, a crucial component. What we have found in this project, the relationships within the communities and within our schools, collaboration the same, optimum learning again for all of our students, to ensure that we're developing that environment or continuing to have that environment that is conducive to that welcoming, caring, respectful, and safe. And really staying true to our intention, like being invested in this project and being invested in the value of it is paramount. So feel free to reach out to Kevin or myself if you have any questions around our project, for sure. And here are some of the questions that we came up with at the end, just for you to consider. And if you have any feedback or thoughts, please ensure that you reach out to us and share some ideas and ask any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barb. Great questions too. That sustainability, I think we're all wondering, as you know, we got this lovely little pot of money, but how do we continue to make that work? And then, of course, I think that's a common thread for all of us around supporting those teachers who maybe are questioning. How do we continue to move them forward and build that trust? I think those are really important threads. Are there any questions out in the group here that you'd like to ask Barb? Okay, being mindful of the time, it's 1:58 and you have all been sitting for an hour, and knowing that we are all very socially and emotionally in tune with ourselves, I'm going to give you a 5-minute break just to have a quick walk around, and then we'll start back at 2:03. We'll test if all of our computers are all in alignment, and I'll get to share a little bit of what we've done in Lethbridge School Division. So we'll see you back shortly. All right, I'll get started. It is 2:04 and I want to make sure that I use all of our time wisely. Just want to say again, thank you for your participation in this collaborative. It's really cool to hear each of the stories from the other divisions as well. And even to sort of, like I was starting to talk about with the questions, the alignment of some common trends that we are all seeing around health curriculum, around self-regulation, around building capacity in students, staff, and parents. I think in the last presentation, super interesting for me to hear about the parent connection piece, because I think that is something that truly does ensure success with many initiatives that we have in education. Restorative approach and continuing to build a culture of learning as well. It's really quite magical and very reinforcing for me as I launch into our journey in Lethbridge, that we're all on a similar page. So elements that played a role in the success of the initiative that we took on just coming out of COVID, system wellness mapping was a big piece of what we did initially to really look at the through lines of the initiative and say, what current structures are in our system that this new thing, nice shiny object worth $380,000, would also connect to data and observations, research, coherence and alignment with other initiatives and events, understanding the context and the landscape. All of us came out of a very similar landscape with COVID. And then, of course, finding excellent people to do that work middle of the year. I think all of us probably were in the same boat as well, that it would have been ideal to have found them in May for the upcoming September, but we found, very luckily, some amazing people to do phenomenal work that is really transforming our division, both culturally and socially and emotionally. So a little bit of an escape room scenario coming out of a worldwide pandemic. Educational leader, mother of 2 teenagers, they're now 16 and 18. August 2023, we returned in that last week and boom, mental health grant, get it written and you got 2 weeks. So we really did have to scramble and do a big assessment really quickly, and then also come up with a plan on how we were going to build buy-in in that interim before we found that funding, whether or not we were going to be successful or not. So things that I was thinking about in August, obviously always having to think about our mission and vision as a board, making sure we were in alignment with the project that I was conceptualizing at the time, and eventually the team of wellness leads were conceptualizing. Where were relationships and trust coming out of the pandemic? That was a tricky one because, of course, we'd had 2 years of not being as in person. Communication, how do we communicate? How are we going to communicate? How are we going to, as we launched this program, ensure that everybody had the right information and was able to look at the language that they were using, and that would be in alignment. The skill set and knowledge of our professionals, where were they at with the initiative? Where is the fun and learning going to happen and with who? We always have to think about fun. It's not good if we don't have fun. Where can the learning be successful first? Interesting to hear from Marty and Sandra, looking at, is it junior high? Is it elementary? Where do we focus? Where do we have the real bubble? Where can we meet the needs? But then also, where do we have the receptivity of the staff? Supporting the new program and staff. So one of the big pieces that I felt was really critical, given that Lethbridge School Division came up with a digital wellness plan of hiring a teacher who was a digital wellness teacher, and then a support staff member, a family school liaison counselor who was going to do the reactivity, the intervention, the vitras, the small groups. How would they be supported? As we know, when we bring in staff who are not teachers into our school system, they have a beautiful different perspective, but then also they don't have the knowledge and understanding of how an education system works. And there's often some really big differences in and beliefs around how systems work. And so I felt it was very important to create weekly meetings with the team, build that team connection, and also build my understanding and ensure that while we were building the plane as we were flying, we were all in alignment and we were all connecting and troubleshooting. And then lastly, the landscape outside the walls of our schools. Coming out of the pandemic, we really were seeing increase in violence threat risk assessments, actually 3 times the amount. We were having a lot more Lethbridge Police Services support, despite the fact that they removed 4 of our youth engagement officers from our school system. We were seeing a lot of mental health challenges down in Lethbridge, as we do continue to see. And we lost all of our psychiatry. So we had no child psychiatrist in Lethbridge for the start of the return from COVID. And if you have any questions as we're going through, please feel free to ask. So I knew through observations and data that students were struggling with managing the social environment on their phones. Students and staff were out of practice socializing face-to-face. Anxiety of students in Lethbridge School Division was significantly higher than Canadian norms. We knew that from our school survey. Reports of violence and crime were elevated in the city of Lethbridge. Families had been enmeshed for 2 years. We've spent a lot of time with Kevin Cameron in the last year returning from COVID. And he has some beautiful research recently around the escalation of behaviors in our complex students. And it really rang true for us here. mental health issues were manifesting online. Also being the mom of a 16 and an 18-year-old, I saw firsthand the challenges of what my kids were doing, maneuvering through, navigating. And I recognized my kids were relatively healthy. The kids who really were struggling coming out of COVID would have even more challenges. Limited professional resources in Lethbridge for mental health. Health curriculum wasn't getting consistent attention K to 12. And then an increase in office referrals in our middle and our high schools around digital misuse. So this is what we started to look at. It's taken from the Digital Wellness Institute. And when we talk about digital wellness, that's been the first piece of what the work we've been doing is, what is digital wellness? And I think even for myself, when I initially wrote this grant, I had a very different vision of what digital wellness was to how it is and what it is now. I think we hear digital, we immediately think technology. And for me, as we've moved forward with my team, we've realized more and more what our students actually, I'm gonna give you a story. So when we think about how we as adults have acquired our morals, our values, our methods of social interaction, we built those in a face-to-face world. Our children, they've built their morals, their values, their interactions in a digital world. And so when we look at how we transfer for us going into digital, we use our face-to-face norms. Our kids use their digital reference to go into face-to-face norms. So it's a super interesting conundrum that I think sometimes we're in as the olders in our world. We think that we know better, or we can sometimes be a little judgy. And I think one of the biggest pieces we've realized is we need to be understanding and honoring where our students are at and how they socialize. Most of it is online, but then also how do we create socially rich environments in our school settings to ensure that when they use those digital tools, they're also developing healthy ways of interacting. And so it's been a very interesting journey, and what we had once thought would be more tech lessons are definitely becoming more, how do we create socially rich environments so that when students go home to tech, or when they go to lunch and use their tech, it's going to be in a way that's socially appropriate. So a checkup on your phone. And this is a part of one of the first activities we did in our admin group, going onto your settings, going to screen time, having a look at your daily average of screen time, and what do you spend most of your time doing on your phone? And then as well, what do you do in your day for the same amount of time? So a lot of our staff were saying, oh, 3 hours of cell phone time a day. And we talked about, well, what else do you do that is off your cell phone for 3 hours a day? And really work was the only thing we could come up with. But those meaningful outside nature movement connection pieces are equally as important. So are we going outside? Are we exercising? Are we connecting with our family? Those kinds of pieces have created a bigger shift and much more a faster buy-in, I think, from our staff in their shift and change in understanding their use as well. So this piece I threw up here because as a system leader, before starting an initiative, it was so important for me to look at all of the different committees, meetings, groups that I knew my digital wellness team were going to have to interface with and interact with. So everything from our policies, our wellness committee, our health champions at each of our schools. We have one designate teacher who is a health champ at each of our schools. Wellness teams, human resources, health curriculum is a piece that from this initiative, we've definitely recognized we have to do more work on and connect with our teachers on and support. Our students, we've heard student voice mentioned many times in these initiatives, mental health capacity building, nutrition programs, digital citizenship, right? And so that's only within our system. We have a whole other level of community like mental health and Alberta Health Services, our comprehensive school health person, Lethbridge Police, and other school divisions that we also work with around that. So for two young people who'd never been in a leadership position or in a systems role before, it was a little bit gobsmacking for them first to kind of go, whoa, this is a lot of humans we've got to move along and interact with and communicate with. And that's the piece that we spent a lot of time strategically talking about. So what we heard from students, this is through our school survey. We did end up having a student forum that was beautiful. We had 100 kids for a wellness and diversity student forum. Then we got so much great feedback, just asking them questions and listening. But what we really heard was FOMO is real. So fear of missing out, students do not want to be missing out. And if other students have cell phones and they don't, they're not engaging because they're missing out on what's going on. So that desire to have all students treated the same way, so all students cannot access their phones, is a more appealing process for students than for, trusting one student to just put it away or take it out when they need it. Students grades 6 to 10 indicated social media is bad for my wellness, sometimes 54%, most of the time 13%, or all the time 7%. So these were our school survey results that we canvassed from grades 6 to 12. Sorry, 6 to 10. Students grades 6 to 10 indicated I have the skills to manage and control my social media. 35% indicated most of the time, sometimes 24%, and never 11%. Social media gets in the way of my learning, sometimes 45%, most of the time 9%, and always 6%. Technology helps me learn, so many did agree with that, and I think we would agree with that is a great tool. It is one tool, and that face-to-face interaction is hard. And so we definitely see that coming out of the pandemic. Face-to-face interaction for two students hanging out socially on a weekend is sitting and hanging out looking at their own phones. It's not the typical way that we, as maybe Xers or boomers, don't want to date myself, but how we may interact. So when considering this initiative, had to definitely say, well, is this sustainable? What are the practices and actions that my teacher and my family school liaison counselor can do so that we can build that sustainability? Will it build staff capacity and understanding? Will the staff find the initiative helpful and easy to buy into? Does it have a clearly articulated purpose? Is there a shared need? Do I have the right people to do the core work? And are they sensibly passionate? I think we've all as leaders worked with people who are passionate, but don't have that balance and measure. Do I believe in it? And then does it complement the work in this community? So the leadership work itself in supporting this initiative as a systems leader, what I recognized in that year coming back, that face-to-face connection was absolutely important. And so Kaysen, Sydney, and I, so the teacher and the family school liaison counselor and I, we went to all the schools. We met at staff meetings. We got ourselves out there, and Kaysen and Sydney were fabulous at pounding the pavement and inviting themselves to different activities and connecting with people. Building that trust is so important. Embracing mutual learning, it's critical, and it's okay to get excited. Risk-taking and mistake-making happens when there is no manual or script, and it's okay not to know everything. I think in a system in Lethbridge, this is the 5th system I've worked in, every system has a very different culture and belief around learning and safety. And I think the piece that we all learned about Lethbridge is we are a little more cautious when we take risks or make mistakes. And so we've had to really ground ourselves in building that culture and supporting people, because if teachers are unwilling to have a look at technology and see how it's working or not working, or explore things with kids and not be the sage on the stage, it's going to be a barrier for sure for our teachers. Our new workforce works differently, so deal with it and learn from them. Both Kaysen and Sydney are under 32, and the energy that they bring in the way they work and what they think of has been so rejuvenating for me as a systems leader who's been doing this for 18 years. The way they proceed and do things is just so unique and different, and I've learned so much in my later years of my career and really enjoyed working with them both. And if you believe in wellness, you have to model it. And passionate leader myself of health and wellness. I was once a physical education teacher who coached 7 or 8 activities a year in high schools. And so for me, this is something that I've always deeply believed in, that we as an education system really have to be committed and dedicated to certainly academics, and also recognize that there are other pieces that are even more critical to our students being successful. I spoke about the cultural and generational divide around the development of social norms and communication, and then as well sort of the judgments and values. I think the one thing that I did learn very quickly coming out of the pandemic was that the youth want to talk about what's on their phone. And our parents kind of have, many parents in my conversations with them, they just say, I don't want to see that. I'm not interested in that. But that is the opportunity to engage with our young people. And if that's what they value, we really have to change how we value and what we see. And so that's one little tip that I think many teachers have said, yeah, I've started to not say put it away, but say, what are you looking at? Tell me about that. And being curious is so critical for our students. It's another way of supervision, right? Learning about education systems and mental health. So the checks and balances from top to bottom. I really have tried to harness both face-to-face feedback, feedback from surveys, anonymous feedback. Both Sydney and Case and our teacher and family school liaison worker, Cason's been teaching many lessons and teaching side by side, and then doing a gradual release model of instruction with our teachers to build their capacity. He's had a lot of exit interviews, exit surveys. He's been so very well received, and that's a piece that I'm so grateful for, that they've wanted to improve and they've wanted that feedback. Everyone wants the quick fix. I think when we hear mental health initiative, I think there's an immediate belief or hope that that will be fixed. But I think we know that wellness always presents on a spectrum from day to day for all of us. And we could be really good one day and not so good the other. And so knowing or thinking that there's a quick fix and everyone will all of a sudden be better, that's not a realistic expectation. We need to look at the measures as we move through. Making sure we have the support of the stakeholders outside of the school system. Real perk of being in Lethbridge, we all know each other and we're all neighbors, and they've all been tremendous supports in helping us navigate this and supporting parents as well. Effective communication this is a very big piece to, I think, any initiative moving forward, whether it's mental health, curriculum, or otherwise, is how you do ensure that communication is consistent. And I would wish and hope for every school division in Alberta to have a communications director like we have, because he truly is magical and supportive of assisting us in figuring out how do we get something out, what do we need to get out, and what are the best methods for that. Student voice matters. So this is a little poster we had made from our student forum where we got a lot of information around wellness and diversity, and it was one of the first big events we had coming out of the pandemic, and so inspirational to hear these kids. One of the adults that was at the event made a comment like, wow, I wish my friends, my adult friends, would have seen how amazing each of these kids, as unique as they are, all connected and talked and got along. Many of you have heard about, the South and the challenges I'm sure that we've encountered down here, and there definitely were significant polarized voices that we had to work through and support and continue to do so. So our digital wellness work anniversary, we've done various things related to Kaysen creating a Padlet of little classes, little workshops, little lesson plans that all align with health curriculum that have a digital wellness lens to them. We've done a Truth About Youth session. So we had parent evening where we had 120 parents come out. It's been super as well that Sydney, the family school liaison worker, she has been able to do small groups follow up when sometimes vitro recommendations are skinny and we have no mental health supports in our community. She's been able to do that follow up and support and coach students, again, rather than responding with a punishment approach. It's a restorative approach of teaching skills, because we know when a young person has been sharing images of something inappropriate, it's not because they necessarily can see the consequences and the road in which they will have to travel after that. It's because they don't see it and haven't had that opportunity to be helped through that. Family fun events, lunch and learns, digital wellness ambassador program. We've got high schools teaching at our middle schools, little mini lessons around digital safety. And then we have most certainly fewer mental health discipline referrals in our middle schools. Those are the two fine people. I didn't want to do this session without celebrating them. They have done the work. Sydney on the left and Case and Mahachuk on the right. Fabulous team to work with, and like every day they've got something exciting and new that they've learned as well, that they share after talking to students, and as a result I selfishly also get to grow. And so that's the end of my session. Sorry that I blitzed through that very quickly, but yeah. Do you have any questions or any feedback? I'd love to, if you have any ideas as well on how we could enhance our program, always open to suggestions. Okay. I'm going to turn over to you, Danica, maybe for this last little bit.
Sure. Thank you. On behalf of Cass and everyone, I would like to thank our presenters today for sharing the stories of practice, and I would like to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. I will just take a moment to highlight that there is a Cass Prospective project on the go throughout this whole webinar series, and it does have some ideas that are being populated in there. So it's the Continuum of Supports and Services project, and you'll see a specific ideas session about these sessions about student mental health. So feel free to go in there and read what others have contributed and also contribute yourselves. And yes, just again, a reminder that there are 2 more sessions coming up on May 15th. You'll hear from school authorities who will be talking about early identification and intervention strategies, and also the Integrated School Support Program, which is a partnership with the Calgary Police, will be sharing some of the work that they're doing provincially during that May 15th webinar. And then on June 5th, we have several school authorities who will highlight the work that they're doing to develop partnerships and navigate pathways to support student mental health. So we certainly hope that you'll make some time to join us for those. I think on that note, Morag, maybe I'll turn it over to you to just say final thoughts.
I'm going to make it short and sweet because I appreciate the amount of time all of you have dedicated to this afternoon. Thank you for coming, and it was a pleasure to hear all of the great work that's going on in Alberta. Thank you for your commitment to mental health in our systems. So thank you very much, everybody.